The wind moved slowly across the frozen expanse of Midgard, carrying with it the scent of pine, old snow, and something quieter than silence. For the first time in a long, unmeasured stretch of years, Kratos walked without purpose. There were no gods left to hunt in these lands, no prophecies clawing at his heels, no father's voice hissing behind the veil of memory. Only the endless white and the slow, deliberate crunch of his boots against ice that had witnessed the death of a world. He carried the Leviathan axe across his back, though its weight had grown strange to him. Once it had been a tool of vengeance sharpened by grief. Now it felt like an heirloom of a man he was still learning to become. The blades of chaos remained bound behind him, dormant, waiting, always waiting. He had not drawn them in weeks. He had not needed to, yet he could feel them listening, as though they knew a truth he had not yet spoken aloud. Atreus was gone. That absence had carved something deeper into him than any blade ever could. His son had left to walk a path only he could see, and Kratos, who had spent centuries taking lives, was learning the impossible art of letting one go. He told himself the boy would return. He told himself this was the natural end of every father's story. But the frost around his heart did not thaw so easily, and the silence that followed each thought was louder than any battlefield he had ever known. He made camp beneath the shattered ribs of an old giant, bones long turned to stone, and built a small fire. The flames trembled against the wind, casting orange light across his scarred face. He watched them the way other men watched the stars, searching for something to remind him that the world could still be gentle. It was in that quiet and that unfamiliar peace that the sky began to change. At first, it was only a shimmer, a faint distortion above the trees, like heat rising from stone in summer. Then the stars behind it began to bend, as if a wound were opening in the fabric of night itself. Kratos rose slowly, one hand drifting toward the Leviathan axe. He had seen many strange skies. He had walked beneath the light of dying gods and burning realms. But this was not the work of Odin, nor the echo of Ragnarok. This was something older, something that did not belong to the nine realms. The fracture widened. A sound came through it, faint at first, then rising like a tide. Voices, not one, but thousands. Some whispered in tongues he had never heard. Others screamed in agony that felt oddly familiar. Beneath them all, a deeper hum, patient and vast, as though a great mind were breathing on the other side of reality. Kratos took a slow step back. The axe was already in his hand. A wave of divine energy burst from the tear, sweeping across the frozen ground and igniting the snow with pale blue fire. Trees bent as though bowing to a passing king. The bones of the ancient giant cracked and hissed. Kratos planted his feet, his jaw tightening, his muscles bracing against a pull he could feel in his bones. Something on the other side had noticed him. Something was reaching. He tried to resist. He drove the axe into the ice and gripped it with both hands, roaring into the wind that dragged at his cloak and skin. But the force did not care for his strength. It did not care for the countless gods he had buried. It pulled him forward, one grinding inch at a time, as though reality itself had decided he belonged elsewhere. Before the rift claimed him, Kratos looked up, and in that brief moment he saw the other side. A city. Not a village, not a fortress, not any settlement he understood. A vast skyline of black towers rose against a starless sky. Rain fell in sheets over glass and steel. A great symbol shaped like a bat glowed against the belly of a cloud. And on a distant rooftop, illuminated by a single stroke of lightning, stood a figure draped in shadow, still as carved stone. Then the world tore away. Kratos fell through a place that had no ground and no ceiling, only motion and light and the murmuring of voices he could not silence. He struck something solid at last, and the sound of his landing was swallowed by concrete and rain. When he opened his eyes, the frozen wilderness was gone. The pines were gone. The bones of giants were gone. He knelt in a narrow alley between walls of brick, breathing steam into cold, oily air. He rose slowly. His weapons were still with him. His scars were still with him. His grief was still with him, but everything else had changed. The rain here smelled of smoke and metal. Neon signs bled color across shallow puddles. Somewhere far above, a siren cried out like a wounded beast, and beneath it, the distant rumble of engines and voices. Thousands of them, layered like a hive that never slept. He walked to the mouth of the alley. Before him rose a city that felt wrong in a way he could not name. There were no runes carved into the stones, no temples reaching toward the heavens, no gods watching from the mountains, yet something watched him all the same. He could feel it in the marrow of his bones, an old and patient attention, the kind he had known his whole life. Red and blue lights flashed at the far end of the street. Voices shouted commands he did not understand. Kratos remained still, letting the rain slide down the length of his scars, and looked upward toward the rooftops. There, half hidden in the darkness above a broken street lamp, a figure crouched. A man shaped from shadow and vigilance, his eyes fixed on the stranger below. He did not move. He did not speak. He only studied the impossible warrior who had appeared in his city and understood with the certainty of a hunter that something older than Gotham had arrived. Kratos walked through Gotham like a man moving through a dream that refused to end. The rain never stopped. The neon never dimmed. The city breathed around him with a rhythm that felt closer to a living creature than any place he had known. He passed alleyways where hungry children watched from behind stacks of crates, and streets where armored cars rolled past churches whose bells had long since gone silent. He saw wealth and rot pressed against one another, separated only by a pane of glass. For a long time, he did nothing. He watched. He listened. He had learned, in the long years since Olympus fell, that a stranger who acted too quickly often left more ruin behind than the enemy he sought to stop. So he studied this new world with the patience of a man who had already lived too many lives. He watched a young mother pull her son away from a shouting drunk. He watched a shopkeeper lock his door 3 times before daring to walk home. He watched a city that had forgotten how to sleep. Then the shouting came. It rose from a side street where a small crowd had been herded against a wall by men in dark coats, their faces hidden by cheap masks. One of them fired a shot into the air, and the crowd flinched as one. A woman clutched her child to her chest. An old man raised trembling hands. The men laughed the way jackals laugh when they have decided that nothing can stop them. Kratos exhaled slowly. He remembered once, when interference had cost him everything. He remembered how easily good intentions became blades in the wrong hands. But he also remembered a boy learning to shoot a bow in a forest long ago, and the promise he had made to that boy about the kind of man he would try to be. He stepped from the shadows. The first criminal turned, weapon raised, and did not have time to fire. Kratos caught the barrel in one hand, crushed it, and struck the man across the jaw with the back of his fist. Bone gave way like brittle wood. The second man fired 3 times. The bullet struck Kratos in the chest, sparked against skin harder than iron, and fell to the ground. The man's eyes widened. Kratos took his weapon, snapped it in half, and threw him into the wall hard enough to shake dust from the bricks. The others tried to run. He did not chase them so much as move through them. There was no flourish in his violence, no shouted challenge, no wasted motion. He walked, and where he walked, men fell. Within the span of a held breath, the alley was silent again, save for the sobbing of the woman and the distant hum of the city. Above him, on a fire escape veiled in shadow, Batman watched every movement. He had seen fighters trained by warlords, assassins bred in mountain temples, monsters wearing the shapes of men. He had seen creatures born of magic and machines that thought themselves alive. Yet what he saw in this stranger disturbed him in a way none of those had. Kratos was not fighting at his full strength. He was restraining himself. And even restrained, he had ended 6 armed men in less time than it took to reload a pistol. Batman dropped from the escape without sound and landed behind him. He did not raise a weapon. He simply spoke. "That's enough." Kratos turned slowly. The rain traced the scars along his skull. His pale eyes narrowed as he studied the figure in black. A man. Only a man. But there was something in the way he stood that Kratos recognized. A stillness that came only from having stared into the dark and refused to look away. "They were harming the weak," Kratos said. His voice was low, worn smooth by centuries. "I will not apologize." "I don't want your apology," Batman answered. "I want your name." Kratos said nothing. "This city is my responsibility," Batman continued. "I do not know what you are. I do not know where you came from. But if you kill in Gotham, you answer to me." Kratos regarded him for a long moment. "You believe you can hold monsters at bay without becoming one. I know I can. Then you have not met enough monsters." The first blow came without warning. Batman moved with the speed of a man who had trained his body into a weapon, and his gauntlet struck across Kratos' temple with force enough to fall a bull. Kratos did not fall. He turned his head slightly, as though considering the impact, and then countered. Batman was already gone, rolling beneath the sweep of the Spartan's arm, planting a small charge against the wall behind him. The blast sent shrapnel and smoke into the alley. Batman followed with an electrified blade that hissed against Kratos' shoulder. Kratos absorbed it. He did not flinch. He caught Batman by the cape, and for the briefest instant, held him aloft the way a hawk holds a struggling hare. Then he set him down. He did not throw him. He did not break him. He simply released him. "You do not fear me," Kratos said. Batman rose to his feet, breathing hard. "No." "Why?" "Because fear makes men slow." Kratos almost smiled. Almost. Before either could speak again, the fallen criminals began to move. Slowly, wrongly. Their eyes filled with a pale green light. Their limbs twitched as though something inside them had been given permission to wake. One of them lifted his head, and his mouth opened wider than a human mouth should. A voice that did not belong to him spilled out, older than any language spoken in this city. Kratos felt it at once. That familiar weight, that ancient hunger. Batman turned toward him. "What is it?" Kratos answered with a single word, the way he had answered many questions in his long and bloodied life. "Gods." Batman looked toward the twitching bodies, and the shadow of Gotham stretched a little longer around them both. The Batcave breathed like a sleeping beast, its vast walls hollowed from stone older than the city above. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, echoing against machines that hummed with quiet, patient intelligence. Kratos stood in the middle of it all, arms crossed, unreadable, while the largest screen he had ever seen flickered with images of himself. Batman worked in silence. His fingers moved across the console with the precision of a surgeon, cross-referencing the stranger's face against every database he could reach. Interpol, the League, Themyscira. The oldest fragments of forgotten mythology. Nothing matched. Every scan returned the same result. An anomaly. A man who did not exist. "You are not from this Earth," Batman said at last. "No." "Not from any Earth I can find." "No." "You understand what that means?" Kratos looked at him. "It means your machines are not wise enough to know me." Before Batman could reply, the air near the entrance shimmered. A shaft of golden light broke across the stone, and from it stepped a woman clad in armor forged in a place no mortal had ever mapped. Her presence filled the cave the way sunlight fills a canyon. Diana of Themyscira looked upon Kratos, and her hand tightened around the hilt of the sword at her hip. "Bruce," she said quietly, "step away from him." Batman did not move. "You know what he is. I know what he has done." Her eyes did not leave Kratos. "I felt it the moment he arrived. Every temple on my island trembled. Every statue turned its face. The old ones remember him, even in this world." Kratos studied her without expression. She carried herself the way the goddesses of his youth had carried themselves, and yet there was something in her bearing that did not belong to them. She did not look down upon mortals. She stood among them. "You are not Athena," he said. "No, yet you are of the same blood. I am the daughter of Hippolyta, forged by gods you have never met, in a world that does not know your name. But I know it. Somehow, I know it." She stepped closer. "Kratos, ghost of Sparta, slayer of Olympus." The name struck the walls of the cave and did not echo. It only settled like ash. Batman's eyes narrowed. "Olympus. His Olympus," Diana said. "Not ours, but the pattern is the same. A pantheon of gods, a mortal who broke them all." Kratos said nothing. He did not deny it. He did not confirm it. He simply stood, allowing the truth to arrange itself around him the way sediment settles after a storm. "Tell me why you came," Diana said. "I did not come. I was taken." "By whom?" "That is what I intend to learn." She circled him slowly, not as a threat, but as one weighing the shape of a wound. "You carry more than blood on your hands. You carry a family. I see it in your face. I see the way you hold silence, like something you have promised to protect." Kratos did not answer. "He killed Ares," Batman said, reading from the screen. "He killed Zeus. He killed Poseidon. He killed the god of the dead and the god of the sea and the god of the sky." He paused. "He killed his own father. He killed a version of his father, Diana corrected gently. In a world that no longer exists, does the distinction matter? To him, she said, it must. Kratos turned his gaze toward the vast screens, where images of ruined temples and burning cities flickered in silence. He had not seen those places in a very long time. He had promised himself he would not look back. Yet here they were, laid bare in a cave beneath a city that should not have known them. I will not speak of my past, he said. You do not need to, Diana answered. The past speaks of you. Above them, in the tunnels that led to the manor, a low tremor moved through the stone. Batman's hand shifted to the console. Screens flickered. Alerts bloomed across every monitor in bright, patient red. Beneath Gotham, deep within its oldest sewer lines, something was writing. Symbols, carved into brick, burned into pipe, etched into concrete by no hand that could be seen. Ancient shapes, older than any written tongue Batman's archives could recognize. He magnified one and stared at it for a long moment. These predate every civilization on record, he said. By tens of thousands of years. Diana leaned closer, her breath caught. They are prayers. To what? To something that should not remember how to be prayed to. Kratos stepped forward. His pale eyes moved across the symbols, and for the first time since arriving, something behind his stone face shifted. Not fear, recognition. They are not prayers, he said. They are invitations. Batman turned toward him. For what? For a door. The one that brought me here. Kratos exhaled slowly. Something opened it. Something knew what I was. Something wanted me on this side of it. Why? That is the question worth answering. Silence fell across the cave. In it, each of them heard the same unspoken thought. A being that could tear open the walls between universes and reach across them to pluck a single warrior from his frozen wilderness was not a being that acted without design. Then the golden light returned. It surrounded Diana in a hush of warmth, and her eyes lifted, unfocused, as though listening to something only she could hear. When she spoke again, her voice was not entirely her own. The gods have opened their hall. They wish to see him. They demand that he be brought before them, that he may account for his presence in their world. Batman looked at her sharply. Which gods? All of them who still answer. Kratos did not move. His hand did not drift toward his axe. His jaw did not clench. He only spoke, and his voice was steady in a way that made the walls seem thinner. I have already answered to gods. The light around Diana flickered. They will not accept that. They will, Kratos said, when I am finished. At that moment, the sky above Gotham cracked. Lightning without clouds tore across the heavens in a single deliberate stroke, illuminating every rooftop and every spire and every startled face that turned upward. The Batcave shuddered. The screens flickered. And far away, in a place beyond stars and beyond time, something older than gods opened its eyes and smiled. The lightning did not fade. It hovered above Gotham for a long moment, suspended in the sky the way a warning is suspended in the mouth of a friend. Then, in silence, it broke into 1,000 smaller flashes, each one traveling in a direction no natural storm would follow. By morning, the world had already begun to notice. News reports spoke of unexplained disturbances in every major city. Statues wept in Rome. The sea rose in Metropolis without a moon to guide it. A temple in Athens, closed to the public for a century, opened its own doors from the inside. And in the sky above Gotham, a figure descended slowly, robed in blue and red, his cape catching the wind like a banner drawn from a better world. Superman touched down on the rooftop where Batman had first watched Kratos. He did not speak first. He waited, as he often did, for the moment to invite him. Kratos stepped out of the shadow at the edge of the roof. His weapons remained on his back. His arms hung at his sides. He measured this new man with the same slow patience he had once used on gods, and found himself, against his will, uncertain of what he was looking at. My name is Kal-El, Superman said. But most call me Clark. I understand you are far from home. Kratos did not answer. I am not here to fight you. That will depend on you. Superman's expression did not change. It remained open, warm, unbothered by the edge in the Spartan's voice. You saved civilians last night. You protected people you did not know. If you had wanted destruction, we would already be counting the dead. I have counted the dead before. I imagine you have. Kratos studied him for a long time. The Kryptonian did not carry himself like a god. He did not tower. He did not glower. He did not radiate demand. And yet the sun bent toward him, and the air itself seemed to still around his shoulders, as though the world were listening in case he chose to speak. "You are stronger than you appear," Kratos said. "So are you. Then we understand each other." They circled slowly, without threat, testing the space between them the way old warriors did in the fields Kratos had walked as a boy. Superman offered a hand. Kratos did not take it. He did offer a nod, small and grudging, and that was more than most men received. The test came without warning. A quiet agreement between two beings who needed to know. Superman moved first, faster than sound, and Kratos met him mid-air, the Leviathan axe rising from his back and clashing against a forearm that should have shattered under the blow. It did not shatter. Sparks bloomed. The rooftop cracked beneath their feet. They separated, breathing evenly, each recalibrating what the other could survive. Kratos struck twice more. Superman parried, then pushed him with a controlled palm that sent him skidding to the edge of the roof. Kratos planted the axe and stopped. He looked down at the drop. He looked up at the man who had not pursued him. "You did not follow through," Kratos said. "You did not either." "No. Then perhaps we do understand each other." Batman arrived on the roof a moment later, Diana at his side, and behind them, faint golden light announced other watchers among the clouds. The League had come to see the stranger, not to judge, not yet, only to see. Diana spoke first. "The gods of this world are stirring, Kratos. Not only mine, others, older ones, some who slept before the Amazons were forged. They have felt your presence, and they cannot decide what to make of you. They never can. There is more," she hesitated. "You know of Apokolips. I do not. You will." She told him then, in careful sentences, of a world outside worlds. A furnace planet ruled by a being who was not a god by any measure Kratos understood, and yet who commanded the reverence gods demanded, Darkseid. The name meant nothing to him at first. Then Diana spoke of what Darkseid had done, of the worlds broken beneath his heel, of the sons he had murdered, of the equation he sought that would enslave every free will in the universe, and Kratos began to understand. "He is not a god," Kratos said. "No, he is worse." Yes. The League had gathered on the rooftop by then. Flash, quiet for once. Green Lantern, his ring glowing softly. Aquaman, water still clinging to his shoulders. They watched the Spartan with the wariness of people who had learned that unfamiliar power was always a question waiting to be answered. Then the sky turned the color of an old bruise. The first parademan dropped from a tier in the clouds and landed on the far edge of the roof. Another followed, then 20, then 100. Boom tubes cracked open across the Gotham skyline like wounds in the world, and from them poured a tide of leathery wings, jagged blades, and pale eyes that burned with borrowed hatred. Kratos moved before the first cry left Superman's mouth. The Leviathan axe came alive in his hand. Frost bloomed along its edge. He did not shout. He did not roar. He simply began to work. The first parademan lost its head to a single upward stroke. The second was crushed against the roof under the flat of the blade. The third and fourth were caught in a spinning arc that sent them tumbling into the night, torn apart before they struck the street below. Beside him, Superman flew into the swarm like a comet given purpose. Diana's sword sang against ancient metal. Batman moved through the shadows, his gauntlets dropping enemies in silence, and Kratos, for the first time in this new world, allowed himself to fight without restraint. It was mythic. It was terrible. It was familiar. When the last parademan fell and the tubes closed, the four of them stood among the wreckage, breathing slowly. Kratos looked at his hands. There was no joy in the killing. There never had been. But there was, for the first time in a long time, a purpose that did not taste of vengeance. Then the air itself parted. A face formed in the smoke above the rooftop, a face carved from stone and hunger with eyes like dying stars, and a voice, older than any Kratos had ever heard on the tongues of the fallen, spoke a single name. Ghost of Sparta. Kratos went very still. Darkseid had reached into his past, and he had brought it with him. The face in the smoke did not vanish. It thinned into vapor and settled over the rooftop like a shroud that refused to lift. His voice remained, low, patient as tectonic plates, and it seemed to enter the air from every direction at once. Ghost of Sparta, Darkseid said again. You do not belong in this world. You know this. You have felt it since the moment you arrived. The wound that brought you here still bleeds. I can close it. Kratos did not answer. He did not raise his weapon. He simply listened because he had learned long ago that the moment a god began to bargain was the moment he revealed his weakness. I know what happened at Olympus. I know what happened before Olympus. I know the temple. I know the wife. I know the daughter. A pause, delicate, deliberate. I know the ash on your skin was once theirs. Superman took a step forward, but Diana raised a hand. This was not a fight to be interrupted. I can return you to your world, Darkseid continued. I can place you on the shore where your ship first landed, or in the field where your daughter first walked, or in the moment before your blade fell. Any moment, any door, any life. There is a price, Kratos said quietly. There is always a price. Name it. Serve me. The word hung in the air, unmoving, the way a blade hangs above a sleeping man. And, Darkseid added, in a tone almost tender, I will do more than open the door. I will lift the weight, the memory, the guilt, the grief. You will not forget your family. You will only forget what you did to them. You will remember only the love. For a long time, Kratos did not move. The rain had begun again. It slid down the length of his scars, past the pale tattoo on his skin, past the chains that never truly left his arms. Somewhere behind him, Batman spoke, his voice quiet but iron hard. Kratos. The Spartan did not turn. If you forget what you have done, you will not become innocent. You will only become dangerous again. The lessons you carry are not a punishment. They are the reason you are no longer the man who deserved them. Diana added, softer. A god who forgets his sins becomes a monster who repeats them. Kratos closed his eyes. In the darkness behind them, he saw a small hand reaching for his. He saw a woman turning to speak his name in a language no one alive still spoke. He saw a fire he had lit in a home he had lost. He saw a boy on a boat, learning to trust the man who had once been unable to trust himself. He opened his eyes. No, he said. The face in the smoke did not change. It only tightened ever so slightly. Then the offer is withdrawn, Darkseid said, and the war begins. The smoke dissolved. The sky did not. Within the hour, the world became a battlefield. Boom tubes tore open above Metropolis, Paris, Tokyo, Cairo, and 100 smaller cities whose names would be spoken in prayers for years afterward. Apocalyptian legions poured through them, screaming a language no human ear could carry. The League split across continents. Superman rose into the sky above Metropolis. Diana flew toward the ruins of an ancient Greek temple that had begun to burn without cause. Flash became a red line across 3 continents. And Kratos remained in Gotham with Batman, because Gotham had been the first door, and Gotham would be where the enemy tested his measure. They fought for hours. They fought through streets. They fought through subway tunnels. They fought across rooftops where rain became steam beneath the heat of the blades of chaos. Kratos moved with a grim economy that unsettled even Batman. There was no showmanship in him, no taunts. No wasted breath. He simply walked, and the enemies of the city fell in the space he passed through. But Darkseid was not trying to kill him. Kratos began to feel it. The waves of parademons were too disorganized. The elite lieutenants were too easily lured away. The enemy was pushing him, hurting him, testing the walls of his patience. Kratos allowed it, because a man who understood a trap could still choose the moment of springing it. The moment came in a collapsed cathedral at the edge of the harbor. The stained glass had shattered across the pews. The rain fell through the ruined ceiling in slow gray sheets. Kratos was struck from behind by a beam of Omega light, precise and terrible, and the world folded. He woke inside a chamber of black stone. Apokolips was not a place. It was an appetite. He knew this the moment his eyes opened. The walls breathed. The ceiling watched. And before him stood Darkseid, seated upon a throne that seemed carved from the bones of extinct civilizations. You will look upon yourself, Darkseid said, and you will see what you have always been. The chamber filled with visions. Kratos saw himself young, kneeling in ash. He saw himself older, standing over Ares. He saw himself standing on the peak of Olympus with his father's blood on his hands. He saw Faye. He saw the boy. He saw every corpse he had ever left behind, arranged in a spiral that had no beginning and no end. You were never free. Darkseid said. "The gods did not lose their war with you. They finished it through you. You destroyed them because they built you to. Every blade, every death, every wound, all of it was their will wearing your face." Kratos did not answer. He could not at first, because for a moment he believed him. Then, from somewhere far away, he heard a boy's voice. Not a memory, not a hallucination, something quieter and truer. "Father, you can choose what comes next." Kratos opened his eyes. He did not roar. He did not shatter the chamber in a burst of rage. He simply rose, and every chain that had ever bound him rose with him. The blades of chaos woke without command. The Leviathan axe answered without being called. And Kratos, for the first time in his existence, was not fighting to destroy a god. He was fighting to refuse one. He tore through the chamber. He tore through the fortress. He tore through the sky of Apokolips and vanished into a tear of his own making. When he returned to Earth, he was quieter, steadier. Batman saw it at once. So did Diana. So did Superman. The ghost of Sparta had walked into hell, and he had walked back out as something else. The war did not build. It arrived. In a single hour, the sky above the earth turned to a churning bruise, and from every horizon, boom tubes bloomed like wounds in a body that could no longer defend itself. Apokolips did not send an army this time. It sent a tide. Every continent burned. Every ocean surged. Every capital shook. Superman flew above Metropolis, a blur of red and blue against a sky that had gone the color of iron. He caught falling buildings before they could crush the streets below. He shattered dropships mid-descent. He stood between civilians and beams of light meant to erase them from the world. He did not tire. He did not slow. But he did not smile either. Diana led the Amazons across the ancient hills of Themyscira, where legions of parademons had made the mistake of setting foot upon sacred ground. Her sword sang. Her lasso burned. Her voice rose above the noise of battle in a language older than empire. She was not defending only her sisters. She was reminding the world what a goddess sworn to mortals could do. Batman worked from the shadows, coordinating fronts he could not personally reach. He directed the League from a war room buried beneath Wayne Manor. He guided evacuations. He calculated angles of retreat. He recognized patterns of attack no one else could see. And in his voice, calm and unwavering, an entire world found the courage to hold its ground for one more hour. Kratos walked toward the largest portal. It had opened above the ruins of the harbor, a spiral of black and gold, wide enough to swallow a city. Around it, parademons rose in swarms so thick they blotted out the sky. Between him and the portal lay miles of broken street and collapsed steel. Kratos did not run. He did not roar. He simply walked, and when a parademon struck him, he answered. When a lieutenant of Apokolips descended upon him, he answered. When a beam of Omega light struck the ground before him, he stepped through the smoke without breaking stride. The blades of chaos burned along his arms in slow, patient arcs. The Leviathan axe returned to his hand each time he threw it, dragging frost across the battlefield. He fought without hatred. That, more than any other change, was the thing Batman noticed as he watched from the drones circling above. The ghost of Sparta had not become gentle. He had become deliberate. Along the way, Kratos did what he had not done in his younger years. He stopped, repeatedly. He pulled a mother from beneath a fallen slab of concrete. He lifted a burning car off a boy whose leg was pinned beneath the axle. He carried an old man across a collapsing bridge before returning to the fight. Each time, the enemy pressed harder. Each time, Kratos returned to the front, blood and ash on his shoulders, and continued walking. Superman saw it from above. He said nothing. He did not need to. There are transformations that require no announcement. They met at the base of the portal, all four of them. Superman, Diana, Batman, Kratos. Around them, the battle raged in 1,000 smaller storms. Above them, the sky spiraled with the promise of something worse. Then Darkseid came. He did not descend. He arrived. One moment the sky was empty. The next, he stood upon the ruined harbor as though he had always been there, and the ground beneath his feet cracked in reverence to a weight it had not been made to hold. The Omega symbols burned in his eyes. His fists steamed. His silence was worse than any speech. Kratos moved first. The clash was mythic. The blades of chaos met Darkseid's forearms and did not turn aside. The Leviathan axe struck his shoulder and drew a thin line of black light where blood should have been. Kratos did not simply strike, he wove. He moved through Darkseid's guard the way a river moves through stone, slow, inevitable, and impossible to hold. Superman joined him. His fists struck Darkseid with the force of collapsing suns. Diana flanked them, her sword finding the gaps their blows could not close. Batman remained at the edge of the field, marking every weakness, feeding every angle back into the ears of his allies. For a long, breathless moment, it seemed that even Darkseid could be pressed. Then he answered. A single beam of Omega light struck Superman full in the chest. It bent around him, hunted him through the sky, and drove him into the side of a mountain miles away. Diana caught the next beam upon her bracers. It shattered them. She fell, blood at her lips, her sword driven into the ground beside her. Batman shouted her name once, and then Darkseid was upon him, and only a last-second dive into a boom tube of his own making pulled him out of the killing arc. Kratos remained. "You cannot change what you are," Darkseid said. His voice was almost soft, almost patient. "Gods do not change. They only grow larger or they die." "I did," Kratos answered. The ghost of Sparta drew a breath, and in that breath he gathered every failure he had ever known and refused to be ruled by. He did not summon rage as a master. He summoned it as a servant. The blades of chaos burned white. The Leviathan axe rhymed the harbor in blue fire, and Kratos struck Darkseid with the full weight of a life he had finally chosen to own. The blow drove Darkseid to one knee. The battlefield paused. Every eye that could see saw. Every soldier who could feel felt. A being older than empires had knelt to a mortal from another world. Then the sky screamed. Not the Parademons, not Darkseid, the sky itself. The tier that had brought Kratos into this universe was beginning to collapse. The energy of the battle was ripping at the fabric of the door, and reality had begun to choose which side would hold and which side would fall. Batman's voice came through a broken earpiece. "Kratos, the rift, it's tearing itself apart. If it closes without release, both universes take the damage." Superman rose from the mountain, coughing blood, and flew back into the sky. Diana climbed to her feet, her hands trembling. Darkseid stood slowly and looked upward. Even he had not planned for this. Kratos looked toward the tier. Beyond it, faintly, he could see snow. He could see pines. He could see a small campfire waiting for a man who had never returned. He could see, or imagined he could see, a shape he had loved. He turned his face away from it and walked toward the collapsing door. The harbor had become a cathedral of ruin. Ships burned in the shallows. Cranes had folded like dying trees. The tier in the sky above them pulsed, expanding and contracting in slow, agonized breaths, and each breath dragged a little more of the world with it. Buildings groaned. The water rose and fell without rhythm. The gulls that had circled the docks for a century did not know where to fly. Batman's voice came again, thin through the ruined comms. "The rift is feeding on the collision. The only way to close it cleanly is to overload the core with divine energy from within, from the inside." "How long?" Superman asked. "Minutes, maybe less." Kratos said nothing. He simply began walking toward the base of the tier, where the air had grown thin enough to cut. Superman caught up first. He hovered before him, palms raised, gentle as a friend and firm as a wall. "Let me do this. My body was made to withstand energies like these. You have another life to return to." Kratos looked at him for a long time. "You have a world here," he said. "A father who taught you to be kind, a mother who taught you to be good, a woman who loves you, a city that needs you to come home. I have a duty. So do I." Diana landed beside them, one hand still pressed to her side. "Kratos, you do not owe this world your life. You did not ask to be brought here. If any of us should walk into that light, it should be one of us." Kratos turned to her. His voice was low, almost soft. "I have spent my life running from what I chose to protect. When I finally learned to stay, my son had already grown. When I finally learned to love, my wife was already gone. When I finally learned to be a father, my father was already the enemy." He looked back toward the tier. "I will not run from this. Not this time. Kratos, I have made my choice." Batman's voice broke in one more time. "There may be another way. Give me 30 seconds. "There is not," Kratos said. "You know there is not." Silence answered him. Batman, who had spent his life inventing another way out of every trap, did not argue. Because Kratos was right, and Batman had learned to honor the choice of a man who had finally learned to make one. Kratos looked at the three of them. Superman with his son, bright grief. Diana with her ancient sorrow. Batman, somewhere in the smoke, listening. "Tell the boy," Kratos said. "If the door ever opens for him, tell him I did not forget." "Tell him yourself," Superman answered. His voice cracked, and he did not care. Kratos almost smiled. Almost. Then he stepped into the light. Inside the tier, there was no ground. There was no air. There was only motion and memory and a strange, patient hum, as though the universe itself were considering him. He saw Athena's mask drifting past him like a dream. He saw Zeus's face, distant and quiet, no longer a father, no longer an enemy, only a man who had once been small. He saw Ares. He saw his own younger self, wearing the ashes of his family and the arrogance of a man who did not yet understand what he had done. He saw Atreus. The boy was older here, taller. His shoulders had broadened. He walked a path Kratos did not recognize, in armor Kratos had not forged. And yet, somehow, he still turned his head at the sound of a footstep, still listened for a voice he had not heard in years. Kratos reached toward him, and the vision softened. Two futures unfolded like the two hands of a scale. In the first, he returned home. He found the fire he had left burning. He waited. Atreus returned. They lived quietly, as fathers and sons do, and the world moved on around them until it forgot both their names. In the second, he remained. He fought beside the heroes of this stranger world. He stood on rooftops in cities that were not his own. He taught himself to protect what he did not build. He grew old, if a god could grow old, in a place that had never asked him to be a god. He understood, at last, that the choice was not between worlds. It was between the man he had been and the man he had promised his son he would try to be. He raised the blades of chaos. He raised the Leviathan axe. He drew every divine energy that had ever branded itself into his skin, and he struck at the core of the collapsing door. The light did not scream. It sighed. Outside, the sky settled. The tier folded inward, slowly, gently, as though a great hand had guided it closed. The Apokolipsian legions faltered. Darkseid, standing at the edge of the battlefield, looked upward with an expression that was, for the briefest instant, not certainty. Then he turned, and the boom tubes behind him opened, and he was gone. Superman rose into the sky. He reached toward the closing tier. His fingers found nothing but warm air. "Kratos," he said. The sky did not answer. Diana knelt in the ruined harbor. She placed one hand upon the ground and bowed her head. She did not weep because she had been raised to honor warriors with silence. But her silence had never been louder. Batman arrived on foot, cape torn, cowl scored by fire. He looked at the empty sky. He looked at the empty harbor. He looked at the two of them. "Do we say he is gone?" Diana asked. "No," Batman answered. "Bruce, he is not gone." "How do you know?" Batman looked at the horizon where the first suggestion of dawn had begun to touch the water. "Because men like him do not disappear. They only find a smaller doorway." Days passed. The world grieved a stranger it had barely met. Statues were not raised because no one knew what to write beneath them. Speeches were not given because no politician wished to claim a hero who had never asked for a name. But in Gotham, quietly, the criminals began to disappear, not to die, to fall. And every witness described the same thing: a scarred warrior, ancient weapons, flaming chains, silent as prayer. The rain returned first. It always did in Gotham, as though the city had a covenant with the sky. Then the reports began. A gang of extortionists found unconscious on a warehouse floor, their weapons twisted into unusable shapes, their bones intact but their pride shattered. A trafficking ring dismantled at the docks in a single night. The doors of every cage opened. The guards laid neatly in a row, breathing but insensible. A cult that had begun to gather in the old cathedral driven out by a figure they refused to describe. Every witness said the same words: scarred, silent, chained. And in each account there was something else, a gentleness. He did not linger. He did not accept thanks. He did not stand over the fallen to gloat. He turned and he walked back into the rain, and the darkness of Gotham simply folded around him again. Batman found him on the 7th night. The old subway line beneath the East End had become a nest for a supernatural gang that called itself the Choir of Broken Names. They had stolen relics from 3 museums. They had begun to change. Their eyes glowed the same pale green Batman had seen on the criminals on the first night the stranger had arrived. The fight was almost over by the time Batman reached the platform. The choir lay scattered across the tiles, weeping, praying, alive. The relics had been broken into fragments too small to reassemble. And at the far end of the platform, half in the light of a flickering bulb, stood Kratos. He did not turn as Batman approached. He simply spoke. "You knew. I hoped. That is close enough." Batman stopped a respectful distance behind him. Around them, the platform ticked with the small sounds of a place that had thought itself forgotten. "You survived the rift. It did not send me home." "No. It sent me here." "Yes." Kratos finally turned. In the pale light, his face was neither triumphant nor bitter. It was, for the first time since he had arrived, at rest. "There are still people who need protecting," he said. "I have decided to remain in this world." For now, Batman studied him. "Why?" "Because I have run out of reasons to leave." They walked together up through the tunnels and into the alleys above. Rain met them at every corner, patient as an old friend. Somewhere a siren cried. Somewhere else, a woman laughed, honest and startled, at something a child had said. Gotham breathed around them, wounded but alive. Superman met them on the rooftop of an unfinished tower. He landed without ceremony and simply looked at Kratos for a long moment. He did not ask questions. He did not demand explanations. He only offered a hand. This time, Kratos took it. Diana arrived last, on foot, as she preferred when she came to bear witness rather than to fight. She did not smile easily, but she smiled then, briefly, and the sky above Gotham seemed to lighten for the space of a heartbeat. The 4 of them stood together on the roof, and for the first time since the rift had opened, none of them spoke of war. "You have changed," Diana said at last. "I have chosen," Kratos answered. Batman looked at him with something almost like respect. "You will not stay hidden much longer. The city has begun to speak of you. Rumors have already reached the wider world. Let them speak. They will make a legend of you. They will be mistaken." Superman shook his head slowly. "Perhaps not. Perhaps they will be right for the first time." Kratos did not answer. He did not need to. He looked out across the skyline, and Gotham looked back at him without demand. Then Batman's earpiece chimed. His posture shifted. The rest of them fell still. "Repeat that," Batman said quietly. He listened. He listened longer. When he lowered his hand, the piece they had almost tasted had already begun to thin. "Darkseid is alive," he said. Diana closed her eyes. "He has been quiet since the rift closed. Long enough for us to hope. Long enough for us to plan. But our satellites have picked up new energy signatures leaving Apokolips. Not toward Earth. Not this time." "Where?" Superman asked. "Everywhere." The words settled slowly on the rooftop. "He learned something from Kratos," Batman continued. His voice was low, careful, the way a doctor spoke when the diagnosis had grown large. "The rift Kratos came through was not a random tear. Darkseid has spent every hour since studying its architecture. He is not looking for a way to invade another Earth. He is looking for a way to invade every Earth, every reality, every possible world where a version of us has ever stood." "The multiverse," Diana said quietly. "Yes." Kratos did not move. His eyes lifted slowly toward the stars. He felt something there, not Darkseid, something behind him, something older, something that had waited a long time for a door to be opened, and had noticed when a man from another world had walked through it, not an army, something that armies bowed to. The wind on the rooftop shifted. The rain lightened. Somewhere in the city below, a bell began to ring, though no church in Gotham had rung its bells in a decade. "You feel it," Diana said softly. "Yes." "What is it?" "Something older than gods." "Kratos." He looked at her. "You have already carried this once." "I have. Are you willing to carry it again?" He did not answer at once. He watched the sky. He listened to the bell. He thought of Atreus, far away, walking his own path beneath a sky that had never known Kratos. He thought of Faye, of the mountain, of the ashes on his skin. Then he thought of the mother he had pulled from beneath the concrete slab, and the boy under the burning car, and the old man on the bridge. "Yes," he said. The bell rang once more and stopped. Dawn had not yet fully arrived when the world understood that it was not alone. The stars began to disappear, not all of them, and not at once. but in small, patient clusters, as though something enormous were moving between Earth and the heavens, blotting out the light of galaxies one careful bite at a time. Astronomers spoke first in confusion, then in silence. Priests in 100 faiths lit candles no one had asked them to light. Children woke from dreams they could not describe and refused to close their eyes. In the war room beneath Wayne Manor, Batman worked without pause. Screens filled the walls. Data streamed from every telescope, every satellite, every sensor the League and its allies could reach. Diana stood at his shoulder, her arms folded. Superman leaned against the far wall, listening more than he spoke. Kratos sat in the corner, the Leviathan axe resting across his knees, silent as a mountain. "The dimensional signatures are consistent," Batman said. "They are echoes of the rift that brought Kratos here. Darkseid has learned to open it at will. Small ones, test doors. He is mapping the multiverse." "For what?" Diana asked. "For every world that has never learned to defend itself against a god." "He has also been noticed," Superman said quietly. Batman turned to him. "There are older powers than Darkseid," Superman continued. "Beings that stayed asleep as long as the walls between worlds held. Kratos coming through was a knock at the door. Darkseid trying to widen the door is a shout. And now something has begun to shout back." Kratos rose slowly. "I have spent my life," he said, "believing that strength meant the ability to destroy. I broke Olympus because I had the strength to break it. I broke the Aesir because I had the strength to break them. I have broken more thrones than most kings ever sit upon." He looked at each of them in turn. "I understand now that this was the smallest part of me. Any beast can destroy. Any storm can level a city. The mountain does not need to think to fall on the village. Strength that only breaks is not strength. It is weight." He set the axe down beside him. "Strength is the ability to choose what not to destroy. It is the harder art. I did not learn it in Sparta. I did not learn it on Olympus. I did not learn it in Midgard, though it began there. I learned it here, in this world, in this city. In a cave beneath a manor with a man who fights monsters without becoming one, and a woman who protects mortals without needing to be worshipped, and a man from another star who bends his power downward instead of using it to climb." Superman looked at the floor. Diana did not look away. Batman said nothing because there was nothing to say. "I have one question for you," Superman said after a long moment. "One only, and you do not have to answer if it wounds you. Ask. Do you regret coming through the rift?" Kratos was silent for a long time. He looked past them, past the walls of the cave, past the manor above, past the city and the harbor and the sky that had begun to thin. He thought of a small campfire in a frozen wilderness. He thought of the boy who had learned to shoot a bow. He thought of a woman whose name he still spoke only in silence. Then he thought of the woman he had pulled from the concrete slab whose name he did not know. He thought of the boy under the burning car whose face he had not seen clearly. He thought of the old man on the bridge who had wept without shame in his arms. "No," he said. They rose together after that. There was no speech. There was no rally. They simply walked, because heroes who spoke too much before a war often had nothing left to say after it. The rooftop above Wayne Manor faced east. The sun should have already broken the horizon. It had not. The sky was the color of dark water, and above it, the shadow of something that had no name reached toward Earth from a place beyond every map ever drawn. Darkseid's voice came again, but it did not come alone. Behind him, faint and vast, another voice moved, older than his, patient as tectonic time. It did not speak in words. It spoke in intention. It intended to enter this world. It intended to enter the next world. It intended to enter every world in which any version of these four had ever stood. Kratos gripped the Leviathan axe. Frost crept along the haft. The blades of chaos ignited along his arms, and their fire did not roar. It steadied. It burned the way a lamp burns in the window of a house that expects a traveler. Batman stepped up beside him. His cape hung heavy with rain. His voice was quiet. "Ready." Kratos looked at the sky. He looked at the shadow. He looked at the three who stood with him. Always. Superman rose a little from the roof, sunlight beginning to answer him at last from beyond the horizon. Diana drew her sword, and the blade caught what light there was. Batman set his stance. Kratos rolled his shoulders once and let the weight of 100 lifetimes settle into a form he had finally chosen. They faced the sky together. The story does not end with the first blow of that war, because that war is not the story of a single day. It is the story of a man who had spent his existence destroying gods, who was offered the chance to forget his sins, and who chose instead to remember them and become something greater than the beings who had made him. He entered this universe as a ghost. He nearly became a weapon again. He was tempted in a chamber of black stone by the promise of a life without pain. He refused, and instead of destroying another world, he chose to protect one. On a Gotham rooftop, as the first true light of a new day finally broke across the harbor, Kratos stood between his allies and looked toward a horizon that no longer felt like a battlefield waiting to be conquered. It felt for the first time in his long and bloodied existence like something waiting to be lived. He did not become a hero because he forgot the monster he had been. He became a hero because he remembered and chose differently.